All right, let's be honest for a second. Have you ever felt like you're just surrounded by idiots? People who just don't seem to get it no matter how many times you explain yourself? Well, the book Surrounded by Idiots says that feeling, it's not just in your head. It's actually a massive communication breakdown. And the root of it all? Well, it might just be a single piece of advice we've all been given our entire lives.
You know the one I'm talking about, the golden rule. Treat others as you want to be treated. I mean, we've all heard it a million times. It's basically the foundation of how we're supposed to interact with each other. And it sounds great, doesn't it? It's simple, it's definitely well-intentioned, it just feels right. Okay, but here's the kicker. What if that's actually some of the worst advice you've ever gotten? That's the whole premise of this book. The author, Thomas Erikson, makes this brilliant point. That rule only works if everyone you meet is, well, an exact clone of you. And I mean, seriously, how often does that happen? And right there, that's where this feeling of being surrounded by idiots starts to creep in. So the author's big aha moment came from this one meeting he had. He's sitting down with this super successful entrepreneur, a guy in his 60s named Stuart. Now, Stuart had built this amazing company from nothing, totally from the ground up. But he had one tiny problem. He was 100% convinced that every single person who worked for him was a complete and total idiot. And what was Stuart's definition of an idiot? Well, it was pretty simple. Anyone who didn't think or act exactly like him. And this is just such a perfect example of the problem, right? Stuart wasn't actually surrounded by idiots. He was surrounded by people who were just different. He was judging everybody by his own standards, using himself as the blueprint for normal. He was using the golden rule, and boy, was it backfiring on him.
And that brings us to the core thesis of the entire book. It's this: effective communication doesn't happen on your terms. It happens on the listener's terms. You can't just force people to get on your wavelength. You've got to adapt. You have to learn to speak their language. It's not just about broadcasting your own message. It's about actually making a connection.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? Well, Erikson breaks it all down using this really simple but incredibly powerful 4-color framework. And this is our first big takeaway, the 4 colors. Just understanding these different languages is the absolute first step to communicating better with everyone. So to get this, I want you to picture a chart. Let's start with a vertical line, an axis running up and down. At the very top, you've got people who are super task-oriented. They're all about the what, getting things done, checking off the list. Then, down at the bottom, you have people who are more relation-oriented. They're focused on the who, prioritizing people, feelings, and harmony. So this first axis is really all about what drives you. Okay, got that? Now, imagine a horizontal line cutting right through the middle of that first one. On one side, you've got your extroverts. These are the outgoing, active folks who get their energy from being around other people. And on the other side, that's where the introverts are. They're a bit more reserved, and they recharge their batteries from their own inner world. This second axis is all about how you act and where you get your energy. So when you put these two axes together, boom, you get 4 different boxes, 4 quadrants. And this creates a kind of map for basic human behavior. Each box gets a color. So you have red, yellow, green, and blue. Think of these colors as mental shortcuts to quickly understand someone's default communication style.
So let's break down what each color represents at its core. Reds are all about being dominant. They're the task-oriented extroverts. Yellows, they're inspiring. They're your relation-oriented extroverts. Greens are defined by being stable. They're the relation-oriented introverts. And finally, blues are analytical, the task-oriented introverts. You can kind of see how each one has its own unique combination of those two axes, right?
All right, so now we have the 4 colors. But the next big idea, our second takeaway, is absolutely crucial. And it's that no single color is the best one. In fact, and this is the key, your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. That's right. The very thing that makes you awesome and effective can, when you push it too far, make you incredibly difficult to be around. It's almost like having a superpower that, if you're not careful, can cause a whole lot of collateral damage. Let's look at the reds, for example. On the one hand, their dominance makes them fantastic leaders. They get things done, they're decisive, they drive for results. That's the strength. But the weakness? If they lean into that too much, they can become controlling, impatient, and basically trample all over people's feelings to get what they want. Then you've got the yellows. Their strength? They are so enthusiastic and creative. They light up a room and are full of inspiring ideas.
But the other side of that coin, they can be pretty unfocused. They can talk so much that they suck all the oxygen out of the room. And sometimes they're not the best listeners.
How about greens? Well, their strength is that they're supportive and reliable. They are the absolute bedrock of any team. Super loyal, great listeners. But the weakness? That sane desire for stability can make them really resistant to change. They can be so averse to conflict that they'll just let a problem get worse and worse instead of speaking up.
And finally, the blues. Their superpower is being analytical and focused on quality. If you want something done right, give it to a blue. They're meticulous. The downside, that perfectionism can easily turn into being overly critical. They can get so lost in the details and the data that they fall into analysis paralysis and never actually make a move. So, if every single color has its own built-in weakness, what are we supposed to do? Well, that brings us to our third and final takeaway, which is probably the most practical one of all. Adapt to win. This isn't about fundamentally changing who you are. It's about learning to adapt your approach.
The book uses this really great analogy of a toolbox. Think about your personality, your default color, as just one tool. Maybe you're a red, so your go-to tool is a sledgehammer. Direct, powerful, gets the job done. But a sledgehammer is great for demolition, not so much for hanging a picture frame. A truly skilled communicator knows they have a whole toolbox, and they know when to put down the sledgehammer and pick up a different tool for the job. And this is where we ditch the golden rule and embrace what the book calls the platinum rule. Treat others how they want to be treated. It's simple, right? So if you're talking to a red, get to the point. Be direct. Focus on the results. If you're with a yellow, match their energy. Be enthusiastic. Share big ideas. For a green, slow down. Be patient. Show you're reliable and build that trust. And if you're trying to convince a blue, you better have your facts in a row. Be prepared. Be logical. It's all about adapting so your message can actually land.
Which brings us all the way back to our original question. After learning all this, who exactly are the idiots?
Well, here's the big reveal. The most important lesson is that the so-called idiots who surround you, they aren't actually idiots at all. The frustration we feel isn't about them. It's about us. It's a sign of our own failure to understand and adapt. They just have a different color. They're playing the game with a different rule book. And realizing that, well, it changes everything. Which leaves us with one last question, a really important one. The question isn't who the idiots are. The real question is, what's your color?